Have you ever wondered how photographers get those perfectly exposed photos with deep shadows and bright highlights? Sometimes it's heavy editing, but often it's done right in camera using metering. Metering sounds a bit technical, but it's actually one of the most important things your camera does. And it can completely change how your images turn out. Hi everybody and welcome back to a new video. I'm Jimmy, a hobby enthusiast photographer based in Sweden. And in today's video, we're diving into something I believe is kind of overlooked in photography, metering. And stick around until the end because I'll share what I rely on the most. Before we dive in, I just want to give you a heads up that this is going to be a little bit technical, so grab a coffee or a tea and get yourself comfortable. This is also based on what I've learned about metering, so if I get anything wrong, be sure to drop a comment in the comment section and correct me, because I love learning from you as well. So what even is metering? Well, your camera doesn't know what you are photographing. It doesn't know your scene. It doesn't know if you're photographing a snow landscape or a sunset or even a dark alley. It simply reads the brightness level coming in through your lens and makes some calculations to say that this is the proper exposure. And that's basically what metering does. It helps your camera to decide how bright or dark your final photo should be. And getting this wrong can lead to blown highlights, crushed shadows, or photos that doesn't match what your eyes saw. So understanding how each metering mode works is super useful. I should probably find a better place to stand because it's actually really windy. For once though, it's actually not cold, so that's something, even though I have a hat on me. First up, the default one, ESP Matrix multi-segment. It has a bunch of different names, but they all do the same thing. This is probably the mode that your camera got shipped with. And what ESP does, it measures lights across the entire frame. And it does this to evaluate the scene and then tries to find a balanced exposure for the image. All right, so an issue here. I said the same thing twice. What I was supposed to say is, think of it like your camera is taking an average reading of the entire scene. It's trying to find a balance between the bright highlights and the dark shadows. And most of the time, it's doing a great job actually. But if there's really bright highlights and deep shadows in the same scene, the camera can still get tricked and expose for the middle, losing important details. So Matrix or ESP is really good for general use like landscapes or normal street photography and even in some cases portraits, because it gives you a overall balanced exposure. But just remember that if your scene has deep shadows and bright highlights in the same scene, that will say, it might expose for the average and you could lose important details in those areas. All right, let's go back to the video. Next up we have Sen Wade metering. This one focuses more heavily on the middle of your frame, giving less importance to the edges, but still account for them a little bit. It's really useful when your subject is in dead center and the background isn't as important. Think classic portraits or even product shots or any other situation where you want your camera to prioritize your subject rather than the whole scene. However, if your subject is off-center, like a classic rule of thirds composition, Sen Wade can misjudge the exposure and your subject may end up a little bit too dark or a little bit too bright, depending on the conditions. It's a great mode when you just want a little bit more control than ESP or Matrix gives you, but without getting as extreme as spot metering, which, speaking of, leads us to our next mode, spot metering. Alright, so now we're really getting specific here. Spot metering measures a super small area, 1 to 5% of your entire scene or the entire frame. On the OM5, it actually meters from the focus point, which is actually really useful. Remember the photo I showed you in the beginning of this video? The one with deep shadows and bright highlights? Spot metering lets you expose specifically for your subject, letting everything else fall into the shadows. It gives you the ability to control the exposure really precisely. If you want somebody's face properly lit in a high contrast scene, or like a bright flower in a dark forest, spot metering is your tool. However, it's important to be a little bit careful. If you move your focus point or recompose after metering, your reading can change and throw off your settings. Most cameras have something called exposure lock or AEL that lets you lock the exposure based on where you meter, so you can reframe without worrying that the settings will be off. Personally, I have my exposure lock tied to my shutter button, which means that I half press my shutter and then I can recompose and take the shot. But honestly, since spot metering follows the focus point on a OM5, I could just move the focus point and yeah, that would be it. If I'm smart, that is. Also, if you accidentally meter off something that's not your subject, like a bright background, your main subject can turn way too dark or way too bright. Spot metering gives you a lot of power, but it also demands a little bit more attention from you as a photographer. Some cameras also offer highlight or shadow metering aside of just spot metering. I'm going to be honest, I've used them close to zero, and I'm not completely sure how they differ from normal spot metering. So instead of pretending that I know, I will just leave it at that, and maybe I will come back to them at some other point in another video. Those are the main metering modes you will find on the most cameras today. Some brands might offer slightly different names or advanced features tied to facial recognition or subject detection, but for the most part, those are your core tools. So how do you actually know what metering mode you should use? Most of the time, it kind of depends on what scene you have in front of you. That's the boring answer, sorry. If you're out walking in a city or shooting some wide landscapes, Matrix or ESP is usually the way to go. It does a great job balancing out the entire scene automatically without needing a lot of extra thought. But if your subject is really important and more centered, like a statue in a square or a lone tree in a field, Sen Wade metering can be a great option to make sure your subject stays properly exposed. And then we have those a little bit more trickier scenes, like someone standing in a beam of light or a bright building against a dark street. That's when spot metering really comes in hand. Spot metering also is great for wildlife photography. If you're photographing a bird perching in a tree or a deer standing in a field, you want to expose properly for the animal itself, not the bright sky or the dark background behind it. I would show you a photo or a video of this, but I literally got no wildlife photos. So yeah, Anyway, it helps the subject pop and naturally gives it a darker background, almost like a, well, natural vignette effect. It lets you expose for that exact subject and lets everything else falls naturally into light or darkness. It's really about asking yourself what's the most important part in this photo and picking the mode that helps you get that result. Okay, so which one do I actually use the most? Well, I guess there's no surprise, but I use Matrix the most. I know, after all that build-up, right?
How dare you!
But hear me out, it's flexible and it works for most situations, and on the OM 5 it's actually quite reliable. That said, I will absolutely switch to spot metering when I need it, especially for those high contrast scenes. Just like with anything in photography, the more you know, the more tools you got to work with. Before we wrap up, I just want to quickly mention my ongoing project Mellanrummet, or the spaces in between. It's all about capturing those ordinary moments that most people would just walk by without a second thought. To make it even more fun, I've created a community version where you as a viewer can submit your photos of everyday scenes, simple real moments that show the beauty in the ordinary. If you would like to be a part of it, you'll find the links in the top of the description. Both the email for sending in your photos and the actual website where you can find the community project. Just make sure to include your name, your location, and a link to your Instagram or website or any other platform you prefer. And thank you so much to all of you who's already contributed to the project. There is really some amazing and great photos in the gallery already. It really means the world to me that we're building something beautiful out of what other people would call nothing. It's simple, it's beautiful. So yeah, again, thank you so much. So, metering is not the sexiest topic in photography, but it's definitely one of the most foundational. Mastering it means more consistent exposures and better control of your final image. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm still practicing and learning each metering mode and when to use them, so I'm no master myself. Let me know down below, what metering mode do you use the most? And have you ever tried spot highlight or shadow? I'd really love to hear how you use them. But if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and consider subscribing. I appreciate it so much. But until next time, have a good day or evening whenever you're watching this. Out!